Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stared at the obstacle course that had become her worst nightmare. For 3 months, she had been trying to pass the Navy SEAL training drills, and for 3 months, she had failed every single one. The other recruits had long stopped looking at her with sympathy. Now they just looked away when she approached. The morning sun beat down on the training grounds as Sarah prepared for another attempt at the rope climb. Her hands were still raw, from yesterday's failure, wrapped in bandages that made gripping even harder. She had dreamed of being a Navy SEAL since she was 12 years old, watching documentaries about these elite warriors who protected their country in the most dangerous situations. Growing up in a small town in Texas, Sarah had been the star athlete in high school. She could outrun most of the boys, outlift half of them, and her determination was legendary. Her coaches always said she had the heart of a fighter. But here, surrounded by the best of the best, she felt like a complete failure. The rope stretched, 30 feet above her, swaying slightly in the ocean breeze. She had made it halfway up dozens of times, but her grip would always give out. Her technique was wrong, her instructors said. She was using too much upper body strength and not enough leg work. But no matter how many times they showed her, she couldn't seem to get it right. Commander Jake Thompson watched from across the training yard. He had been observing Sarah for weeks now, noting something different about her compared to the other struggling recruits. While others gave up or complained, Sarah kept coming back. Every failure seemed to fuel her determination rather than break it down. Thompson had been a SEAL for 15 years. He had seen thousands of recruits come through these gates, and he had developed an eye for spotting potential. Most people thought SEAL training was about physical strength, but Thompson knew better. It was about mental toughness, about refusing to quit when everything in your body and mind screamed to stop. Sarah approached the rope again, chalking her hands despite the bandages. The other recruits had finished their attempts and were moving on to the next drill. She was alone now, which somehow made it worse. Every failure felt more public, more embarrassing. She jumped up and grabbed the rope, immediately feeling the familiar burn in her forearms. Hand over hand, she pulled herself up, trying to remember to use her legs to take some of the weight. 10 feet, 15 feet, 20 feet. She was higher than she had ever been before. Her heart raced with excitement and fear. But then it happened again. Her grip loosened, her muscles gave out, and she slid down the rope so fast it burned through her bandages. She hit the ground hard, landing awkwardly on her ankle. Pain shot up her leg, but she tried to hide it. The last thing she needed was to be seen as weak. Thompson had seen the fall and the way she favored her left foot as she walked away from the rope. He also noticed that she didn't complain, didn't make excuses, and didn't ask for help. She just limped over to the next station, ready to fail at something else. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her bunk, icing her ankle and staring at the ceiling. Her bunkmate had been reassigned after washing out last week, so she had the room to herself. The silence was deafening. She thought about calling her parents, about telling them she was thinking of quitting. They would understand. They would tell her she had given it her best shot. But every time she reached for her phone, she stopped herself. She wasn't ready to give up yet. There had to be something she was missing, some key that would unlock her potential. She had never been a quitter, and she wasn't about to start now. Outside her window, she could see other recruits studying together, helping each other prepare for the next day's challenges. But Sarah had become somewhat of a pariah. Not because anyone was mean to her, but because failure seemed contagious in a place where success meant everything. She opened her training manual and read about rope climbing techniques for the 100th time. The words blurred together as exhaustion took over, but she forced herself to keep reading. There had to be something she was missing, some detail that would make the difference. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Sarah made herself a promise. Tomorrow would be different. Somehow, some way, she would find a way to pass at least one drill. She had to believe that her dream was still possible, even when all evidence suggested otherwise. The next morning would bring new challenges, new opportunities to fail, and new tests of her determination. But it would also bring an encounter with Commander Thompson that would change everything about her approach to SEAL training. Sarah didn't know it yet, but she was about to learn the most important lesson of her life, one that had nothing to do with rope climbing or obstacle courses, and everything to do with understanding what it truly meant to be unstoppable. Sarah's ankle throbbed as she hobbled to the morning formation. She had wrapped it tightly and taken pain medication, but each step reminded her of yesterday's failure. The other recruits formed perfect lines while she struggled to keep up, trying not to limp too obviously. Commander Thompson stood at the front, his steely eyes scanning the group. He was known for his intensity and his ability to spot weakness from a mile away. Sarah tried to stand straighter, hoping he wouldn't notice her injury. The last thing she needed was to be pulled from training for medical reasons. The morning briefing was about mental resilience, a topic that felt like salt in Sarah's wounds. Thompson spoke about the difference between those who succeed in SEAL training and those who don't. It wasn't about being the strongest or the fastest, he explained. It was about having an unbreakable spirit. Sarah listened carefully, hanging on every word. Maybe there was something in his speech that could help her unlock whatever was holding her back. She had the physical capabilities, her test scores proved that. But something was preventing her from translating that potential into actual performance. After the briefing, the recruits moved to their assigned training stations. Sarah was scheduled for the obstacle course again, the same series of challenges that had defeated her every single day. As she approached the first obstacle, a wall climb, she noticed Commander Thompson following her group. Her heart sank. Having the commanding officer watch her fail would be the ultimate humiliation. She had managed to fly under the radar for the most part, but now she was about to showcase her incompetence in front of the person who could end her SEAL dreams with a single recommendation. The wall stood 12 feet high, requiring recruits to run, jump, grab the top edge, and pull themselves over. Sarah had made it over exactly 3 times in 2 months of attempts. Her success rate was embarrassing, especially compared to recruits who cleared it effortlessly every time. She took a deep breath and sprinted toward the wall. Her timing felt good. Her jump was strong and her hands found the top edge cleanly. But as she tried to pull herself up, her injured ankle betrayed her. The pain shot through her leg, disrupting her concentration and weakening her grip. She fell backward, landing hard on the sand. The impact knocked the wind out of her, and she lay there for a moment, struggling to breathe. When she looked up, Commander Thompson was standing directly over her, his expression unreadable. The other recruits had moved on to the next obstacle, leaving Sarah alone with the commanding officer. She scrambled to her feet, expecting a lecture about wasting everyone's time, or a suggestion that maybe she should consider a different career path. Instead, Thompson surprised her. He didn't yell or criticize. He simply asked, "What happened to your ankle, Martinez?" Sarah hesitated. She could lie, claim it wasn't bothering her, and try to push through the pain. But something about Thompson's direct gaze made dishonesty seem impossible. "I landed wrong on the rope climb yesterday, sir. It's just a little sore." Thompson nodded slowly. He had seen her fall and had noticed her trying to hide the injury. "And you thought you could hide it and keep training?" "I didn't want to be pulled from the program, sir." Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. She was sure this conversation was ending her SEAL career before it had truly begun. "Martinez, in 15 years as a SEAL, I've learned that there are 2 types of people in this world," Thompson said, his voice calm but intense. "Those who make excuses and those who find solutions." "Which type are you?" The question caught Sarah off guard. She had expected criticism or dismissal, not a philosophical challenge. "I try to find solutions, sir, but I keep failing every drill. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this." Thompson studied her for a long moment. Other instructors might have agreed with her self-assessment. Her performance record spoke for itself. But Thompson saw something in her persistence that intrigued him. Most recruits would have quit weeks ago after experiencing her level of consistent failure. "Follow me, Martinez," he said, turning away from the obstacle course. "Leave your gear here." Sarah limped after him, confused and nervous. Were they going to the medical facility? The administrative office where washout paperwork was processed? Her mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Thompson led her to a quiet area behind the main training facility, where old equipment was stored. There were ropes, wooden boxes, and various training materials that had been retired from active use. He stopped in front of a simple wooden post with rope attachments. "Before we had fancy obstacle courses and high-tech training equipment, SEALs learned the basics on simple tools like this," Thompson explained. "Sometimes going back to basics helps us understand what we're really trying to accomplish." He picked up a piece of rope and demonstrated a basic climbing technique, moving slowly so Sarah could see every detail of his hand placement and body positioning. His movements were fluid and efficient, completely different from her desperate, strength-based approach. "The rope doesn't care how strong you are, Martinez," Thompson said as he descended. "It responds to technique, timing, and understanding. You've been trying to muscle your way through every challenge, but that's not how SEALs operate." Sarah watched carefully as he demonstrated again, this time explaining the physics behind each movement. How weight distribution affected grip strength, how proper leg positioning could reduce upper body strain by 70%, how breathing rhythm could maintain stamina over longer climbs. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a spark of hope. Maybe her failures weren't due to some fundamental inadequacy. Maybe she had just been approaching everything wrong. Thompson wasn't giving up on her. He was giving her the tools she needed to succeed. As the private lesson continued, Sarah began to understand that her biggest obstacle wasn't physical limitations or lack of courage. It was her own approach to problem solving. She had been so focused on not failing that she had forgotten to focus on learning how to succeed. Commander Thompson handed Sarah the rope, his weathered hands showing years of training experience. The simple piece of equipment felt different now that she understood the theory behind using it properly. Instead of seeing it as an enemy to be conquered, she began to view it as a tool that would respond to the right technique. "Your first mistake. Martinez is thinking that failure means you're not good enough," Thompson said, settling onto a wooden crate to watch her attempt. "In SEAL training, failure is information. It tells you what doesn't work so you can find what does work." Sarah wrapped her hands around the rope, but instead of immediately trying to climb, she took a moment to position her feet correctly. Thompson had shown her how to create a footlock that would support most of her body weight, allowing her arms to guide rather than carry her entire load. She made it 5 feet up before her technique fell apart and she slid back down. But this time, instead of frustration, she felt curiosity. She had climbed higher with less effort than ever before. The approach was working. She just needed to refine it. "Again," Thompson said simply, "but this time slow down. Speed comes after accuracy." Sarah nodded and tried again, forcing herself to move deliberately rather than rushing. Footlock, hand placement, breathing rhythm. Each element had to work together like parts of a machine. 7 feet this time before she lost her form. "Better," Thompson observed. "What did you learn?" "I need to reset my foot position more often," Sarah replied, analyzing her attempt. "And I'm still using too much arm strength when I panic." For the next hour, Thompson guided Sarah through systematic practice. He didn't just tell her what to do. He helped her understand why each technique worked. The physics of leverage, the importance of muscle memory, the mental aspects of maintaining calm under pressure. Other recruits passed by occasionally, heading to their scheduled training activities. Some glanced over curiously, wondering why Sarah was receiving special attention from the commanding officer. She had been nearly invisible for months, known mainly for her consistent failures. Now she was getting one-on-one coaching from the most respected instructor on base. Marcus Weber, one of the top performers in their class, stopped to watch for a few minutes. He had been climbing ropes successfully since his first week, making it look effortless. Watching Sarah struggle with basic techniques had always puzzled him. She clearly had the physical ability, but something had been blocking her progress. "Commander, why is she getting private lessons?" Marcus asked during a water break. His tone wasn't hostile, just genuinely curious. Thompson looked at Marcus thoughtfully. "Weber, how many times have you failed the rope climb?" "Never, sir. I got it on my second try the first day." "And what did you learn from those 2 attempts?" Marcus paused, not sure where the conversation was heading. "That I could do it, sir?" "Exactly. You learned that you could do it, and then you stopped learning." Thompson's words carried weight that Marcus didn't fully understand yet. Martinez has failed this drill dozens of times, but each failure has taught her something new about technique, about perseverance, about problem-solving under pressure. When she finally succeeds, she'll understand rope climbing better than anyone in this class. The conversation made Marcus uncomfortable. He had always believed that natural ability was what mattered most in SEAL training. The idea that failure could be more educational than success challenged his entire worldview. Meanwhile, Sarah was making steady progress. Her technique was becoming more consistent, and she was starting to trust the footlock system Thompson had taught her. The rope climb that had seemed impossibly difficult in the morning now felt manageable. even with her injured ankle. As the afternoon wore on, Thompson began expanding the lesson beyond rope climbing. He talked about how the principles applied to every aspect of SEAL training and operations, the importance of systematic thinking, of learning from mistakes, of staying calm when everything seemed to be going wrong. In combat, Martinez, you won't get to practice a maneuver dozens of times before you have to execute it perfectly, Thompson explained. But the habits you're building now, the way you approach problems and learn from failure, that's what will keep you and your team alive. Sarah felt something shifting inside her mind. For months, she had been focused on passing individual drills, on avoiding embarrassment, on proving she belonged. But Thompson was showing her a bigger picture. SEAL training wasn't about perfecting specific skills. It was about developing a way of thinking that could adapt to any challenge. The sun was setting when Thompson finally called an end to the session. Sarah had successfully climbed the practice rope 3 times in a row, using proper technique and maintaining control throughout each ascent. Her ankle still hurt, but she had learned to work around the limitation rather than let it defeat her. Tomorrow morning, you'll attempt the official rope climb again, Thompson said as they walked back toward the main facility. But your goal isn't to pass or fail. Your goal is to apply what you've learned and continue learning regardless of the outcome. Sarah nodded, feeling more confident than she had in months. But as they reached the edge of the training grounds, Thompson stopped and turned to face her directly. His expression was serious, almost stern. Martinez, I need you to understand something important, he said. I'm not giving you special treatment because I feel sorry for you. I'm investing time in you because I see potential that you haven't recognized yet. Don't prove me wrong. The weight of his words settled on Sarah's shoulders. This wasn't charity or sympathy. It was an opportunity, maybe her last chance to prove she belonged in SEAL training. Tomorrow would be the real test of whether Thompson's faith in her was justified or misplaced. Sarah barely slept that night. She kept replaying Thompson's words and visualizing the rope climbing technique he had taught her. Her ankle felt better after a night of rest and ice, but more importantly, her mind felt clearer than it had in months. She understood now that her biggest enemy hadn't been the physical challenges, but her own approach to facing them. The morning formation felt different. Sarah stood straighter, not because her problems were solved, but because she finally understood what she was really trying to accomplish. When Thompson announced that rope climbing would be the first drill of the day, she felt nervous but not terrified. As the recruits lined up for their attempts, Sarah noticed Marcus Weber watching her with curious eyes. Word had spread about her private training session with Commander Thompson. Some recruits seemed resentful that she was getting special attention after months of failure. Others appeared genuinely interested in seeing if the extra coaching would make a difference. The first few recruits completed their climb successfully, as they had been doing for weeks. Their technique was solid, their confidence high. They made it look easy, which had always made Sarah's struggles seem even more embarrassing. Then it was her turn. Sarah approached the rope, feeling dozens of eyes watching her. This was the moment. That would determine whether Thompson's investment in her time and effort had been worthwhile. She took a deep breath and began her pre-climb routine, something Thompson had taught her the day before. Instead of immediately grabbing the rope and trying to power her way up, Sarah spent a moment checking her foot position, adjusting her grip, and centering her breathing. The other recruits had never seen her take such a methodical approach. Usually she attacked the rope with desperate energy and failed within seconds. She began to climb, moving deliberately and maintaining the footlock position Thompson had drilled into her. 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet. She was already higher than most of her previous attempts, and she felt completely in control. Her arms weren't screaming with exhaustion because her legs were doing most of the work. 20 feet, 25 feet. Sarah could hear murmurs of surprise from the recruits below. No one had expected this level of improvement overnight. Even Marcus, who had been skeptical of Thompson's teaching methods, found himself impressed by the dramatic change in her performance. At 30 feet, Sarah touched the top marker and began her controlled descent. She had done it. After months of failure, she had not only completed the rope climb, but had done it with textbook technique. As her feet touched the ground, she heard scattered applause from some of the other recruits. Commander Thompson watched from his position near the training office, but his expression remained neutral. He had seen recruits succeed once and then immediately revert to old habits. The real test would be whether Sarah could maintain this level of performance consistently. "Martinez," Thompson called out as she stepped away from the rope. "Wall climb next." The wall climb had been another consistent source of failure for Sarah. The 12-foot barrier required explosive power, precise timing, and upper body strength to pull over the top edge. With her ankle still tender, this would be a true test of whether she could apply Thompson's lessons to different challenges. Sarah approached the wall with the same methodical preparation she had used for the rope climb. She studied the surface, planned her approach, and took time to visualize successful completion. The other recruits had moved on to their next stations, but a few lingered to watch her attempt. She sprinted toward the wall, planted her foot at the optimal takeoff point, and launched herself upward. Her hands found the top edge cleanly and, instead of immediately trying to muscle her way over, she used her legs to walk up the wall face while her arms maintained her grip. The technique worked perfectly. Sarah rolled over the top of the wall and dropped down the other side, landing in a controlled crouch that protected her injured ankle. 2 successful attempts in one morning after months of consistent failure. She was starting to believe that Thompson's approach might actually work, but the real challenge came at the third station, the obstacle course that combined multiple elements including crawling, jumping, climbing, and sprinting. This complex drill had defeated her every single time, usually at different points depending on her energy level and mental state. As Sarah approached the starting line, she noticed that Thompson had moved closer to observe. His presence made her nervous, but she reminded herself of his words from the day before. The goal wasn't to pass or fail, it was to apply what she had learned and continue learning. The first obstacle was a low crawl under barbed wire. Sarah had always rushed through this section, trying to save energy for the more difficult challenges ahead. But Thompson's lessons about systematic thinking made her reconsider this approach. She moved through the crawl deliberately, maintaining proper form and breathing rhythm. Instead of emerging exhausted and dirty, she felt controlled and ready for the next challenge. The extra few seconds spent on proper technique actually left her with more energy for the remaining obstacles. The series of hurdles came next, followed by a rope swing over a water pit. Sarah had fallen into that pit dozens of times, usually because she grabbed the rope wrong or mistimed her release. This time, she took a moment to study the setup and plan her approach. Everything was working. Each obstacle that had previously defeated her now felt manageable when approached with the right combination of technique, timing, and mental preparation. Sarah was beginning to understand that SEAL training wasn't about being superhuman. It was about being systematic, adaptive, and persistent. As she approached the final obstacle, a combination wall climb and rope descent, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed in her approach to challenges. She was no longer fighting against the equipment or trying to prove her worth through raw determination. She was solving problems, one element at a time. The transformation was so dramatic that other instructors had gathered to watch. Word was spreading that Martinez, the chronic failure, was having a breakthrough day. But Sarah was so focused on applying Thompson's lessons that she barely noticed the growing audience. Sarah completed the obstacle course in record time, not because she moved faster, but because she moved smarter. Each challenge flowed into the next without the wasted energy and repeated attempts that had plagued her previous efforts. As she crossed the finish line, she could hardly believe what had just happened. The other recruits stared in amazement. Marcus Weber, who had dominated every physical challenge since day one, found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about success and failure. How could someone improve so dramatically overnight? What had Thompson taught her that their regular instructors hadn't covered? "Martinez, report to my office after morning drills," Thompson commanded, his voice giving no indication of whether he was pleased or disappointed with her performance. The neutral tone worried Sarah. Maybe her success was just a fluke. Maybe Thompson expected even more improvement. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of successful attempts. Sarah completed every drill she attempted, not perfectly but competently. The chronic failure, who had been on the verge of washing out, was suddenly performing at the same level as the middle tier of recruits. It was an unprecedented turnaround. During lunch break, several recruits approached Sarah with questions. They wanted to know what Thompson had taught her, what secrets had been revealed during their private session. but Sarah found it difficult to explain. The techniques were important, but the real change had been in her mindset and approach to problem solving. He didn't teach me any secret moves, Sarah tried to explain to a small group gathered around her table. He helped me understand that I was making everything harder than it needed to be. I was fighting the obstacles instead of solving them. Marcus listened from a nearby table, struggling to accept what he was witnessing. He had always believed that success in SEAL training came naturally to those who were meant to be there. The idea that failure could be transformed into success through better thinking challenged everything he had been taught about ability and potential. When training resumed in the afternoon, Sarah found herself facing new challenges. The instructors, having witnessed her morning transformation, decided to test whether her improvement was real or temporary. They assigned her to advanced drills that she had never attempted before. The swimming portion of training had always been Sarah's weakest area. Growing up in landlocked Texas, she had learned to swim in community pools, not in the open ocean with full gear and time pressures. The instructors sent her to the beach for combat swimming drills that would challenge even experienced swimmers. As Sarah stood in the surf, wearing full combat gear and breathing apparatus, she felt the familiar wave of doubt creeping in. This was completely new territory with no previous attempts to learn from. Thompson's lessons about systematic thinking would be put to their ultimate test. She took time to observe other swimmers, noting their stroke technique and breathing patterns. Instead of jumping in and hoping for the best, she developed a plan based on her observations and the principles Thompson had taught her. Energy conservation, proper form, and staying calm under pressure. The first drill required swimming 500 meters in full gear while staying below the surface for designated periods. Sarah had never attempted anything like this before, but she approached it methodically. She established a sustainable rhythm, trusted her training, and focused on technique rather than speed. To everyone's surprise, including her own, Sarah completed the drill within acceptable time parameters. She wasn't the fastest swimmer in the group, but she had successfully completed a challenge that would have been unthinkable for her just days earlier. Commander Thompson watched from the beach, taking notes on his clipboard. He had seen many recruits show temporary improvement, only to revert to old patterns when faced with new stresses. Sarah's performance in unfamiliar territory would reveal whether his investment of time had created lasting change. The afternoon continued with increasingly difficult challenges. Combat diving, underwater navigation, and equipment recovery drills that pushed Sarah into completely uncharted territory. Each new challenge was an opportunity to apply Thompson's lessons about learning from obstacles, rather than being defeated by them. By late afternoon, Sarah had successfully completed every assigned drill. Not with perfect scores, but with competent performance that demonstrated real understanding and capability. The chronic failure had become a functional SEAL candidate in the span of a single day. As the training day ended, Sarah made her way to Thompson's office as instructed. She was exhausted but exhilarated, feeling like she had discovered a completely different version of herself. The office was sparse and functional, with commendations and photos from Thompson's years of service covering one wall. Thompson was reviewing her performance reports from the day when she knocked on his door. He gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk, his expression still unreadable. Sarah waited nervously for his assessment of her dramatic turnaround. "Martinez, what happened out there today?" Thompson asked, his tone neutral and professional. "I applied what you taught me, sir," Sarah replied. "I stopped fighting the obstacles and started solving them. I focused on technique and learning instead of just trying not to fail." Thompson nodded slowly. "And how did that feel different from your previous attempts?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "It felt manageable, sir. Like the challenges were puzzles to solve instead of enemies to defeat. I wasn't afraid of making mistakes because I knew they would teach me something useful." "Good," Thompson said, finally showing a hint of approval. "Because what you experienced today is just the beginning. Tomorrow, we're going to find out if you can maintain this level of performance when the pressure increases and the challenges become even more difficult." The conversation that followed would set the stage for the most important test of Sarah's SEAL training. Thompson had a specific reason for investing so much personal attention in her development, and tomorrow she would learn what that reason was. Thompson leaned back in his chair and studied Sarah carefully. She had proven that his teaching methods could create dramatic improvement, But tomorrow would reveal whether she had truly internalized the lessons or was just experiencing temporary success. Martinez, I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you, Thompson said, his voice taking on a more personal tone. I've been watching you fail for 3 months, and every single day you came back ready to try again. Do you know how rare that kind of persistence is? Sarah wasn't sure how to respond. She had viewed her constant failures as embarrassing proof of her inadequacy, not as evidence of some positive character trait. Most recruits who struggle like you did either quit or get angry, Thompson continued. They blame the instructors, the equipment, or the program itself. But you kept analyzing your mistakes and looking for solutions. That tells me something important about your character. Thompson stood up and moved to the window overlooking the training grounds. I'm assigning you to a special exercise tomorrow. It's called the Leadership Under Pressure Drill, and it's typically reserved for recruits in their final month of training. You'll be leading a team through complex scenarios where everything that can go wrong will go wrong. Sarah's stomach dropped. Leading other recruits seemed impossible when she had barely figured out how to complete basic drills herself. Sir, I don't think I'm ready to lead anyone. I just learned how to pass the rope climb yesterday. That's exactly why you're ready, Thompson replied, turning back to face her. You understand failure better than any recruit in this program. You know what it feels like to be overwhelmed, to doubt yourself, and to keep pushing forward anyway. Those experiences make you uniquely qualified to help others when they face their own breaking points. The conversation was taking a direction Sarah had never expected. She had spent so much time focused on her own shortcomings that she had never considered how her struggles might actually be preparing her for something larger. Tomorrow, you'll be leading Marcus Weber's team, Thompson said, noting Sarah's surprised expression. Weber is technically the best performer in your class, but he's never faced real adversity. When things go wrong in combat, technical ability isn't enough. You need leaders who can think clearly under pressure and help others find solutions when everything seems impossible. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk, thinking about the enormous challenge ahead. Leading Marcus and his team seemed like setting herself up for another spectacular failure, but Thompson's confidence in her abilities made her want to try. Meanwhile, Marcus was having his own difficult night. The news that he would be taking orders from Sarah Martinez, the chronic failure turned overnight success story, challenged everything he believed about hierarchy and competence. How could someone who couldn't pass basic drills just days ago suddenly be qualified to lead him through advanced exercises? The next morning brought unusual activity to the training grounds. The Leadership Under Pressure drill required elaborate setups with multiple scenarios designed to test decision-making under extreme stress. Sarah arrived early to review the mission briefings, trying to prepare for challenges she had never faced before. When Marcus and his team assembled, the tension was obvious. These were the top performers in their class, men who had consistently excelled at every challenge. Now they were being asked to follow someone who had been the laughingstock of the program just yesterday. Listen up, Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt inside. I know this situation is weird for everyone. You're used to following people who never fail, and I'm used to failing at everything. But Commander Thompson believes there's something I can offer this team, so let's figure out what that is. The honesty and directness of her approach surprised the team members. They had expected either false confidence or nervous uncertainty. Instead, Sarah was acknowledging the reality of the situation while focusing on moving forward constructively. The first scenario involved navigating through a simulated enemy compound while rescuing hostages and avoiding casualties. Multiple objectives had to be accomplished simultaneously, requiring careful coordination and clear communication under pressure. Within minutes, everything started going wrong. Equipment malfunctioned, team members received contradictory information, and time pressure mounted as simulated enemies closed in. Marcus, who had never experienced this level of chaos in training, began to panic and issue contradictory orders. "Stop," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the confusion. "Everyone freeze where you are." The team stopped moving, surprised by her authoritative tone. Sarah took a deep breath and applied the systematic thinking Thompson had taught her. Multiple problems needed to be solved simultaneously, but they had to be prioritized and addressed methodically. "Weber, you're focused on the technical aspects of breaching the compound, which is your strength," Sarah said calmly, "but you're trying to solve every problem at once. Let's break this down into manageable pieces." She quickly reorganized the team's approach. assigning specific responsibilities to each member based on their abilities, while maintaining overall coordination. Instead of trying to accomplish everything simultaneously, she created a sequence of actions that built on each other logically. The transformation was remarkable. The same team that had been paralyzed by confusion began moving with purpose and efficiency. Sarah's experience with failure had taught her to stay calm when things went wrong, and that calmness spread to the rest of the team. As the exercise progressed through increasingly difficult scenarios, Sarah's leadership style began to emerge. She didn't pretend to be the most skilled team member, but she excelled at helping others apply their skills effectively when under pressure. Her months of learning from mistakes had given her an intuitive understanding of how to adapt when plans fell apart. By the end of the day, Marcus and his team had successfully completed scenarios that typically caused even experienced teams to struggle. The difference wasn't in their individual abilities, which hadn't changed overnight. The difference was in having a leader who understood how to function effectively when everything seemed to be going wrong. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood in formation wearing the Navy SEAL trident pin on her uniform. The same woman who had failed every drill for months had not only completed the program, but had graduated near the top of her class. Her transformation had become legendary among the instructors, a story they would tell future recruits about the power of persistence and the right mindset. Commander Thompson watched the graduation ceremony with deep satisfaction. He had seen something special in Sarah's refusal to quit, and his instincts had been proven correct. But more importantly, her journey had taught valuable lessons to everyone involved in the training program. Marcus Weber had also graduated, but his experience being led by Sarah had fundamentally changed his understanding of leadership and competence. He had learned that technical ability without adaptability was limited, while the ability to think clearly under pressure and help others succeed was invaluable in real combat situations. After the ceremony, Sarah found Thompson near the administrative building where their journey together had begun. She wanted to thank him for seeing potential in her when she couldn't see it in herself, but she also had questions about why he had invested so much time in a seemingly hopeless case. "Commander, can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they walked toward his office. "Why did you choose to help me when everyone else had written me off?" Thompson smiled, the first truly relaxed expression she had ever seen on his face. "Martinez, in 15 years as a SEAL, I've learned that the most dangerous situations aren't the ones where everything goes according to plan. They're the ones where everything falls apart and you need people who can think clearly, adapt quickly, and keep fighting when all hope seems lost." He paused at the window overlooking the training grounds where new recruits were attempting the same obstacles that had once defeated Sarah. "You spent months learning how to function when everything was going wrong. That's the most valuable skill any SEAL can possess, but it can't be taught in a classroom or learned from a manual. It has to be earned through experience." Sarah understood now why her failures had been so important. Every mistake had been preparation for leading others through their own moments of crisis. Every humiliating defeat had built the mental resilience that would serve her in combat situations where lives depended on clear thinking under extreme pressure. "There's something else," Thompson continued. "I've recommended you for advanced leadership training. Your ability to help others perform better when everything seems hopeless is exactly what we need in the field. Your greatest weakness became your greatest strength." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. The same persistence that had made her a laughingstock for months had ultimately made her valuable as a leader. Her willingness to fail repeatedly while learning from each mistake had developed skills that couldn't be acquired any other way. As the weeks passed, Sarah's reputation continued to grow. She was assigned to training teams where her ability to remain calm under pressure and help others find solutions made her an invaluable asset. Recruits who were struggling with their own challenges began seeking her guidance. One afternoon, Sarah found herself in the same position Thompson had once occupied, watching a recruit fail repeatedly at the rope climb. The young man's frustration was obvious, and Sarah recognized the same desperation she had once felt. "Having trouble with the technique?" she asked, approaching the struggling recruit. The recruit, exhausted and embarrassed, nodded without looking up. "I've been trying for weeks, ma'am. I think I'm just not strong enough for this program." Sarah smiled, remembering her own thoughts from months earlier. "Strength isn't the problem. Let me show you something about technique and persistence that someone once taught me. As she began demonstrating the systematic approach Thompson had taught her, Sarah realized that her journey had come full circle. The lessons she had learned through failure were now helping someone else avoid the same mistakes. Her experience with defeat had become a tool for helping others achieve success. The recruit listened carefully as Sarah explained the principles of leverage, breathing, and mental approach. She could see the same spark of hope in his eyes that she had felt during her private lesson with Thompson. Sometimes the difference between failure and success was simply having someone who understood the struggle and could show a better way forward. That evening, Sarah received orders for her first operational deployment. She would be leading a team in a complex mission that required exactly the kind of adaptability and crisis management skills she had developed during her darkest days of training. The failures that had once seemed like insurmountable obstacles had actually been preparing her for this moment. As she packed her gear, Sarah reflected on the unexpected path that had brought her to this point. She had entered SEAL training believing that success meant never failing. Instead, she had learned that true success meant learning from failure so effectively that you could help others navigate their own challenges. Commander Thompson had given her more than just technical instruction that day. Behind the training facility, he had given her a new understanding of what it meant to be strong, what it meant to lead, and what it meant to serve. The rope climb had been just the beginning. The real test had been learning to see failure not as an ending, but as preparation for something greater. Years later, when Sarah told this story to new recruits facing their own moments of crisis, she would always emphasize Thompson's most important lesson. Sometimes the people who struggle the most during training become the most valuable leaders in combat, because they understand that defeat is never final unless you choose to stop learning from it. The woman who couldn't pass any drill had become the leader others turned to when everything went wrong, proving that persistence combined with the right guidance could transform any obstacle into an opportunity for growth.